So, with those things in mind, we're going to shoot over to the godless engineer for the historicity of Jesus.
Well, to start off, I have been doing kind of a series on my channel about the historicity of Jesus. And to preface, I'll say that I don't believe that Jesus was an actual historical figure. One of the biggest reasons why I believe this is because of the lack of historical evidence for this Jesus character. Um, amongst other things, of course. It's not like I have a whole position that's built on this one single tenet, um, or bit of evidence, or lack of evidence, as it were. But one of the common arguments that I get about this lack of evidence is that a lack of evidence doesn't indicate that Jesus didn't exist. And while under most circumstances that would be true, but there are certain events in Jesus' supposed life that we can look at, and we can expect historians to actually take notice of these events. And the fact that there is substantial reason for the historians to take notice and to write them down and to comment on them in their works, the fact that they don't is actually really good evidence. So when people come to me and they say, well, a lack of evidence, that's just an argument from silence, I would have to disagree, because like if you take, for instance, when Jesus supposedly died, there was an earthquake and there was 3 days of darkness. Okay. Now, in AD 79, or 79 BCE, Pompeii was destroyed by Mount Vesuvius. That particular event is so well chronicled that we have accounts from years leading up to the event, and then we actually have evidence of the event happening. And we have specific earthquakes that happen in 62 BCE and then 64 BCE. We have contemporary historians recording earthquakes happening in those times. And then when it gets closer to the actual event happening, we have historians recording that the earthquakes were happening so often that the Romans were just used to the earthquakes going on. So just for Jesus' life in general, particularly at his death, if earthquakes were to have happened as the Bible specifies, then we would expect these historians of the time that recorded natural occurrences like earthquakes and like solar eclipses, we would expect them to record these things. Now, one thing that a lot of people come back with after mentioning that is, well, it was probably just a man that walked around and he had some really good teachings and whatnot. Okay, that's fine. If you really want to reduce Jesus down to that, then you're not really subscribing to the Jesus of Christianity, because the Jesus of Christianity has a very specific profile, and it's set out in the Bible. And not to mention the fact that there were writers of the time that criticized messiahs, failed messiahs, and religions of the time, that they wrote about them then, like during Jesus' time, and they didn't write anything about anybody that could be even remotely considered Jesus. So you have to ask yourself, at what point do you really throw away this idea that Jesus existed at all, like as far as the notion of Christianity goes? Because once you reduce Jesus to practically nothing as we know him, then how can you really call that person Jesus or anything? Like, even if you sit there and you say, well, his name probably wasn't Jesus, it was something else. It's like, okay, then it's not Jesus. If you don't have this profile of Jesus being born in the reign of King Herod, and then sometime 10 years later, he's that's another apparent point that he's born. Or if you're going to say, well, Jesus probably didn't really storm the temple and cast out the money changers. You see, these are things that Christians actually believe. They believe it so wholeheartedly that they bet their eternal salvation on it. And so, with a good portion of Christians in America today believing in a literal Jesus Christ, that the Gospels are historical accounts that were written by first-hand observers. Attacking this idea of Jesus is really hitting them where they think that they are the safest. And this argument from silence isn't really a weak point, but it's actually a very strong point.